For those living in rural areas of the world, wildlife is a common topic brought up in discussions. Those who live alongside the creatures living in the woods, prairies, or swamps know how to coexist with many of them, and know which ones to avoid. But when those creatures leave their habitat and start invading towns with an unordinary quench for blood, one's got to think, perhaps it might not be a good idea to explore the woods at night. Join me in this episode as we head deep into the woods of North Carolina to look for the vampire cat known as the Beast of Bladenboro. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Moonlight Lore. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Hopkins. Today we are going to be discussing the strange case of a supposed vampiric cat cryptid known as the Beast of Bladenboro, who terrorized the small towns in Bladenboro County, North Carolina back in the 1950s and was supposedly spotted again as recently as 2007. Nestled comfortably among farmland, swamps, and pine forests, the very small town of Bladenboro might just seem like any other small community dotting America's rural landscape. For those with a bit more knowledge of its history, know it was home to a horrifying cat-like vampiric monster who plagued the area for 10 days straight. The first reports take us back to the 29th of December in 1953 to a farmhouse just outside the town of Clarkton, just 10 minutes down the road from Bladenboro. The woman who first witnessed the beast first heard her neighbor's dog outside barking violently, which slowly turned into a whimper. A bit concerned for the dog's well-being, and to be a good neighbor, she walked outside to make sure the dog was okay. It was when she approached the broken dog chain and noticed the large paw prints in the dirt leading towards the tree line, did her squinting eyes finally focus and see a large, cat-like creature slowly creeping off into the darkness of the forest. It wasn't until just a couple days later on New Year's Eve did the beast seem to rear its dark figure again. A farmer by the name of Woody Storm made an urgent call to the Bladenboro Police Department about a large creature attacking two of his dogs. Police Chief Roy Flores responded to the call and was met with Woody outside his home, standing over two corpses. The two chatted for a bit, both knowing what kind of wildlife are in the area. Black bears, alligators, and bobcats could be to blame for this case, though it's unusual for them to leave the woods, come to a farm, and blatantly attack two loud dogs. It wouldn't be unheard of. But when inspecting the two mangled corpses of the canines, Chief Flores reported noticing something a little off. Both had been completely drained of their blood. Over the next couple days, reports continued to pass over the desks of officers at the Bladenboro PD, and each time they went out to investigate, they would find the same thing. Beloved family dogs were being targeted all across the county. One of the many calls Chief Flores received was from a man named D.G. Pate, who said he was an eyewitness to seeing a dog being attacked at the edge of a tree line by a large, unknown creature who was able to quickly kill the dog and drag it off into the woods. In total, it's known about half a dozen dogs were mutilated with broken jaws, decapitations, and ripped apart totally with what looked to be massive fangs. Not only this, but dogs weren't the only victims of the attacks. Goats, pigs, and even a pet rabbit all fell to the malicious actions of this mysterious creature, all of which were drained nearly completely of all their blood. Those who were unfortunate enough to witness these savage events all say the same thing. What they saw was similar to that of a large black panther. It was after so many of these attacks did Chief Flores realize him and his officers weren't equipped or weren't able to spare their limited time combing the woods and swamps outside the town for any kind of animal. It was because of these reasons Chief Flores decided to call in some help. He got into contact with a group of experienced big game hunters from an hour away in the city of Wilmington, who agreed to come and hunt the creature for Forrest. When they arrived, the group, including Chief Forrest, departed into the woods, spending hours tracking and laying traps. But the days passed and nothing came from the multiple hunts. Nothing so much as a peep from this suspected vampire feline. Until on the 5th of January, when a young woman named C.E. Kinslaw was up late one night when she began to hear the faint whimpers of a dog outside her home. When she slowly and cautiously opened the door into the dark unknown, she was met with two glowing yellow eyes facing her and moving closer. The creature was fast, and she only got a quick glance at it when it came close enough to be illuminated by the porch light. But when it got close enough so she could see its face, it pounced. With a scream, Kinslaw slammed the door shut just as the beast was inches from the door. Her husband quickly rushed downstairs to comfort her, and while sobbing, she shared what she saw. A giant black cat with large fangs and long claws had just attacked her. By this time, word had spread all across Bladenboro County and beyond to the neighboring towns and cities of the dreaded vampire feline known as the Beast of Bladenboro. Newspapers from all across North Carolina began covering the strange story of dogs, small animals, and even an adult woman becoming victims to the wrath of the beast. Hunters from all across the state, including those from as far as the state of Tennessee, jumped at the opportunity to bag the dreaded beast. Even a fully armed group of fraternity brothers from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill made a showing at the small town. With the town now basically overrun with eager hunters and trappers, Chief Forrest gathered up the incredibly large posse of roughly 500 to 600 would-be monster slayers and ventured into the woods and swamps. They spent hours in those moonlit woods, shooting and killing many innocent animals they believed to be the beast. But it was difficult to traverse the wet, thickly wooded terrain, and even harder to track the footprints in the dark. So after several hours of tracking and shooting animals they suspected to be the monster, the mob decided to head back into town and wait until the next day when they could head back out to continue in more favorable conditions. Now, you might be wondering, why did so many hunters and trappers descend on the small town of Bladenboro looking to take on the challenge? Well, the mayor at the time, W.G. Fussell, along with Chief Forrest, released a very specific statement in the newspapers which drew in the eyes of those avid and eager hunters. It was advertised by Fussell and Forrest in the paper a reward would be given to the hunter or hunters who brought back the Beast of Bladenboro, dead or captured alive. I'm not quite sure what the bounty must have been, but it must have been large enough to cause so many people from all across the state, including neighboring ones, to flock to the small town for a chance to win it. But, as one could imagine, all of these hunters in the woods, firing off their weapons in the dark, aiming at anything that moved, wasn't necessarily a safer alternative to a giant vampire cat. Now not only did the citizens of Bladenboro have the monster to contend with, they had hunters shooting wildly just beyond their property lines. I'll quote Ev Butler, who lived at the town during this time, who said, "Nighttime was a feared time around these parts. As the sun set, the entire community on the west side of town went indoors and didn't come out unless necessary." Things were obviously growing out of control in Bladenboro, and with the citizens of this small town now voicing their concerns over the hunters, Mayor Fussell couldn't ignore their cries for much longer. By now, there were roughly close to 800 to 1,000 hunters funneling through the small streets of town and heading off into the woods, where they would return out a few hours later, bringing in animals left and right claiming it was the beast. But all were initially dismissed, as many of the corpses brought in were common large cats, alligators, bears, or whatever the hunters could get a shot off at. On the 8th of January, Mayor Fussell received a letter from the Asheville Humane Society, who condemned and began protesting the poaching and active slaughter of so many animals by so many people. With this now unwanted bad press, this put pressure on the mayor to at the very least suspend the hunt for the beast until it was spotted again, or until it was suspected of killing or attacking another dog or person. Though of course, a few small hunting parties were still permitted to leave behind traps and continue the hunt under strict rules and supervision. It wasn't until January 13th that the remains of an unusually large bobcat who had been trapped by a local farmer out in the swamps was presented to the officials. It was probably in an attempt to just end the madness did Mayor Fussell and Police Chief Forrest declare the hunt had officially ended, and accepted the large bobcat as the Beast of Bladenboro. While parading the beast through and to the middle of town, a crowd began to form and hundreds of people came out to lay their eyes on the monster that had terrorized their town for nearly 2 weeks. Both Mayor Fussell and Chief Forrest had the cat's body strung up, hanging in the center of town from a flagpole where they both had their photo taken with it and allowed the town's citizens to come and witness the beast themselves. This then subsequently caused majority of the hunters who had previously invaded the town to find the beast themselves to finally head back from where they came from, allowing the town to begin the healing process from a week-long campaign against the local wildlife. Though some who came to see the bobcat strung up in the center of town had their doubts on if it was really the creature, there were many who were still hesitant to believe they were really safe and that the Beast of Bladenboro was still on the prowl. Although sightings of the creature had definitely plummeted after the supposed capture and death of the large bobcat back in the 50s, there were still the occasional sightings which came to light within the weeks after January 13th. But overall, those sightings dwindled out and many remnants of the beast died out. That is, until decades later, when the beast supposedly returned to North Carolina and was back to its old habit of consuming the blood of its kills. Just about 100 kilometers away from Bladenboro, the small village of Bolivia was visited by an unknown creature who was able to kill a family's pet pit bull, to which its mangled body was drained of all its blood. Several other family dogs were killed under the same mysterious circumstances by which seemed like the same creature. Then, on the opposite side of the state, 250 kilometers away from Bladenboro, just outside the city of Lexington, a farmer's whole herd of 60 goats were completely slaughtered and their skulls crushed in, and of course, completely void of their blood. And just 30 minutes down the road outside of the city of Greensboro, another herd of goats were attacked and killed under the same exact circumstances. If this was the same animal, or at the very least an offspring of the Beast of Bladenboro, it was certainly making its rounds in North Carolina's countryside again. However, this wasn't to last. As quickly as these new encounters appeared, they disappeared. With very little physical evidence left over, we're unfortunately stuck wondering if this creature was a relative to the original beast seen in Bladenboro back in the 1950s. And there are a lot of people who wonder about this. Many believe the story of the beast was simply made up from the beginning and that those cases of sightings back then, as well as encounters as recent as 2007, were greatly exaggerated. Taking a look back at the near beginning of the story, Mayor Woodrow Fussell had been quite open and honest during the entire time the town was besieged. He was a firm believer that any press was good press and was eager to draw attention to his humble town. Which is why, when the attacks began, he saw the opportunity to bring tourism to his town. So, as we know how the story went, he had the story published not only in the local newspaper, but in ones from nearby cities and towns too, deliberately drawing in the hordes of hunters and curious people eager to spot the beast. This motivation from the mayor possibly came from a selfish perspective too, as after the first couple attacks and word started to spread, Mayor Fussell had booked a movie called The Big Cat to play at the small town's movie theater, advertising that now everyone can come and see the beast on screen and in color. This, of course, is the part where I also mentioned the mayor also just so happened to have owned the theater at the time. Selfish reasons aside though, the fact remains the town was indeed plagued by a dangerous predator who had a strong taste for blood. Those savage dog killings and attack against C.E. Kinslaw just outside our home weren't imagined and were very much real incidents. So now we're left wondering, was the Beast of Bladenboro an actual supernatural vampiric cat, or are we dealing with a creature which could be much more commonly found in the area? Cougars, or commonly known as mountain lions, seem to be the most obvious answer here. They are an apex predator, perfectly capable of and willing to attack dogs and humans to get its next meal. And during the events which took place back in the 1950s, the citizens of Bladenboro could hear the blood-curdling screams of what sounded like a woman being murdered coming from the woods. And now, if you haven't heard what a cougar sounds like in the woods, it can be quite terrifying. But more importantly, it sounds the exact same way the screams were described as in the woods and swamps outside Bladenboro in the 50s. And here I'll provide a sample of what a mountain lion's scream sounds like if you heard it coming from the woods. These screams would cause anyone to want to stay indoors at night, and definitely concern any dog who was chained up outdoors. But here's the thing, even though cougars are known to be a part of North Carolina's history, they were completely wiped out back in the late 1800s from overhunting. They no longer live in the state, but reports of sightings appear from time to time. Though oftentimes these reports of sightings turn out to be either completely false or mistaken sightings of bears, large dogs, coyotes, or bobcats. Now, it wouldn't be the wildest thing for a cougar to have traveled in from another part of the country. Animals have made similar kind of treks for unknown reasons and have shown up in stranger places. But wildlife is intensely monitored in North Carolina, and if one had slipped in, it would have been known by officials. Black bears and coyotes were also suspected of being the perpetrator of these attacks, but simply put, for those who consistently see and live near wildlife on a daily basis, they wouldn't confuse either of these two as something like a giant cat or a mountain lion. All three are distinctly different and have many features which the others don't. I myself live near the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and I know I could never confuse a coyote or black bear for any kind of cat. So this leads me to the last option we have. Of course, it is the most likely one. North Carolina is chock full of bobcats populating the forests and swamps surrounding rural communities like Bladenboro and Clarkton. Bobcats themselves aren't necessarily a large breed of cat like the cougar, but can be roughly the same size as a larger breed of domestic dog. While most of the time bobcats hunt and feed on animals typically smaller than them and are more likely not to put up a fight, they are known to have attacked and killed full-grown adult deer by jumping onto their backs and biting down on their necks. And while it's rare, these attacks can also extend to dogs too. The description of the vampiric beast is also similar to that of the common bobcat. The bobcat's fur coat can come in a variety of colors of dark gray, light gray, brown, black, some white, and while this mix of colors might seem like an obvious giveaway to what the beast might have been, we have to remember the Beast of Bladenboro was only ever seen under the cover of night. It was only ever thought to have been spotted by a few people during this time, and every time it was, the sun had already gone down. Human eyes, especially when trying to adjust to the darkness, can play tricks on our mind concerning what we think we're seeing. And when adrenaline is pumping through our veins, details can definitely become clouded and people might see things a little wrong. In this instance, someone might not be able to tell if the dark coat of a bobcat's fur was anything other than pure black. But with this point, I also want to say there is a very, very, very rare possibility a bobcat near Bladenboro could have suffered from a mutation called melanism. This is a mutation commonly found in larger cats like leopards, cougars, and panthers, and also known to be found in bobcats, but is much less likely than the others. But this mutation affects the pigments in skin and hair, causing them to turn a dark shade of black. So while this could be an explanation for what could have been the case here, from what I've read online, only about 12 sightings of bobcats with this mutation have ever been seen and reported in all of North America. So while yes, it's a possibility, it's highly unlikely. But the paw prints found left in the mud and dirt accurately match up with the same size of a large bobcat, and the depth of its imprint match up with the typical weight of one too. And while bobcats can be quite vicious carnivores, they can be scared off easily with loud noises, which matches up to the scenario C.E. Kinslaw found herself in when she screamed and slammed the door on the approaching predator, scaring it off. From what it seems, the description does match, and the fact a bobcat was caught and killed, subsequently ending the sightings and attacks afterwards, suggests to us it was indeed just a dangerously brave and hungry bobcat. Though, it does leave us with a single question. While yes, bobcats will consume the blood that comes off the meat of their kill, they certainly do not have the need or ability to drain their victims completely dry of it. So here we are again at the near end of the episode. We have a good idea what the Beast of Bladenboro most likely was, the details match up, and we have photo evidence of the mayor and police chief posing with the corpse of a bobcat. But as always, we're left with questions on if it truly was what we concluded it to be. The bobcat theory, while yes is the best theory, it doesn't explain why each victim was notably drained of its blood when found. It's also quite strange a bobcat would constantly go against its nature and attack so many dogs who are more than capable of putting up a fight. And while yes, bobcats will kill and eat what they can when they're hungry, most of their kills consist of small creatures like rabbits, squirrels, and the occasional bird they could catch. So with this case, I'm going to still say it was most likely a bobcat rather than a supernatural vampiric feline, but I'm still hesitant to believe it was all just that. But it's also worth to note the flames were fanned quite a bit by town officials in order to draw up attention in tourism. The facts given to us could have been completely fabricated to make a bobcat appear to be a rare and unique creature never been seen or heard of before. I myself need to constantly remind myself to take these stories with a grain of salt, as simply put, I wasn't there to experience any of it, so I don't know if what really had been reported was what happened. We're all just left here to wonder if what happened in Bladenboro County in 1954 was caused merely by the actions of an aggressive bobcat, or by the malicious campaign for death and blood by a supernatural feline never discovered or documented before. There are many people who still wonder to this day, what truly lurks in the wild forests and swamps of North Carolina, under the moonlit sky. Hey, what's up there everyone? I'm just jumping in here at the end of the episode to say thank you for your constant support in the creation of this podcast. Your feedback and constant listening has been very rewarding and very helpful, so thank you for that. If I could ask you of one thing though, is if you could continue to support the podcast by sharing with your friends and family who you think might be interested in listening as well. It would be a great way to show your support and to grow the show into a community of like-minded people. As always, if you have any questions or just want to send me a message, you can send me an email at moonlightlorepodcast@gmail.com and also on Instagram at moonlightlorepodcast or on Twitter at loremoonlight. Your continued support means a lot to me, so thank you and please keep it up. I love hearing from you, so don't hesitate to send me a message. I'll see you next time.